How's it going, Evo? How you doing?
Hey Joe, happy to see you, man. It's going great.
Yeah, likewise. I think the last time we saw each other was we were cruising around in your Tesla one day, and that was super fun. So,
Oh yeah. I was telling everyone about how I wanted to get you excited about the data engineering scene in Austria and all the stuff that's happening over here.
to be fair, I think Austria is it's lovely. At least the parts that I saw, I really want to get to Vienna sometime and check it out. I think you've raved about how lovely it is, and it's not the first person who said that. So,
Right. Well, the whole city is like a museum, and I always joke about with our customers that we also like to keep it this way, but let's not get our IT departments to turn into museums, right? So
mm,
that's not a cool thing to have. You have to keep up with the technology. You have to innovate, and But other than that, Vienna is a lovely place to just stroll around and check out the history, the music, the everything. Yeah.
the IT departments as a museum is certainly a theme we'll touch back on. But yeah, for the audience, for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Oh yeah, sure. So yeah, my name is Ivo. I in the data engineering / data consulting business. Prior to that, had multiple roles in with Deloitte in data analytics and forensics. I was a managing director / division head of a bank in Austria doing data office, data engineering, various IT topics, project topics. And prior to that, I was a software developer. So I do have the hands-on experience. And one of my particular interests is really the data space, and more particularly the data engineering space. So 2 years ago, I decided to move back to consulting and build a data engineering team. It's been going great so far.
It's awesome. Yeah, I mean, how Austria, it's an interesting place, right? I mean, it's not really considered a huge hub of technology, in at least from the American standpoint. But when we were talking, it seems like you guys are working on some really cool stuff, and it's apart from your comment about IT departments becoming museums, there's obviously enough work happening right now. I mean, walk me through what's
Yeah, well, part of the reason why IT departments turn into museums is when they can afford it, right? If it's a wealthy nation with, actually, we don't have a lot of IT companies, but we do have a lot of traditional
you have a
enterprises.
lot of
And also
enterprises.
financials, and the financial sector is certainly strong and kind of runs kind of the banking and insurance business of the entire, I guess, has a huge stake in the entire Eastern Central European area, right? So quite a lot going on there, and partly through culture, partly through just out of sheer being conservative about not making mistakes and whatnot. You do tend to have like locking into older technology, which you do in an excellent way, but you tend to keep for a lot longer than what you do in the US. You just would rather change the technology stack way quicker than we would over here, right? We're very cautious moving to a new technology stack. One of the things we're working on is everything cloud data warehousing, streaming system, API management, and kind of combining the. I grew this as a as a data engineering practice, but also we're moving now away from doing purely services, also into developing our own product, which just to share a word about it, is in stealth mode, but will be announced soon, and it's kind of fully bootstrapped in the past 3 years. Developed this kind of think your book, fundamentals data engineering, combined with the book from Gregor Hopp in enterprise integration patterns. So you have the upstream connectivity of applications for what we've seen as challenges to our customers, integrating different applications, with connecting legacy to modern APIs, real time high load, in a financial space, in a payment space, insurance space, combined with having the ability to orchestrate conversions and define them with UI auditing, and central configuration, decentralized deployment, and testing, and all those features that you want to see in an enterprise that have to function well, kind of like this is the space where you're writing software for kind of it's like writing software for Boeing, right? Where it has to run without any mistakes in order for you to kind of drive high volume, high frequency, for example, in a bank specs transactions and handling huge amounts of data throughput combined with traditional ETL components, right? So out of what we see in the services practice of just working through just projects in the data engineering space, modernizing old systems, modernizing data warehousing, to kind of saying, hey, we can actually extract a product out of this tailored to the enterprise, but in a very lightweight mode that we haven't seen with other I guess major. I'd say the closest I think to this is, let's say, what MuleSoft and Salesforce has,
Yeah, it
which
sounds
is
like
way
that
more
sort of.
complex. But this is kind of moving away from a services business into a product company in a non-VC, kind of bootstrapped kind of way, almost on the side, while continuing to think of ourselves as we provide data engineering services and are specifically interested in building out data engineering teams in a way that is, as you mentioned earlier, kind of untypical for a place like Austria. So that's actually quite a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's really cool, and it seems like it's born out of your direct experience too. Like this is, I just find the European enterprise sector is just a completely different beast than what you'd find in America. These are a lot of family-run businesses, and by family, I mean like generational type businesses that have been around for a long time, right? Because of a lot of employment dynamics, people stick around at jobs a lot longer, like sometimes forever. And the systems, like you say, they just tend to be older.
Exactly. You want to build a business, not just to max it out and kind of exit it and celebrate the exit, but rather as kind of like a generational exercise where you would build it and pass it on to your family, and that's very common here. But generally in the German-speaking space, so we're active in Austria, Germany, Switzerland. But it is the situation. However, that doesn't mean that you cannot think. It enables you also to think more longer term on things. But also there's a peculiarities in the general labor market situation, right? Because you have very strict employment law. There tends to be this onion model of having internal employees and contingent workforce with consultants and kind of like service companies like ours. That tends to be way more pronounced than otherwise. We're just joking the other, saying, hey, we have externals and internals here in the US. Everyone's an external, right? Because you just have employment at will and all those kind of. I mean, obviously with Kev it's not that simple, but still there's this difference where it's one of the risks you want to mitigate by on the one hand working with a consulting company in order to that keeps up with the technology the way like in the internal workforce probably would not. While at the same time, the internal folks are focusing more on the service management, more on really managing relationships with an external company that does the engineering for them, that does the consulting, and that does the implementation for them, rather than trying to kind of do everything on their own. Consider also the very limited kind of availability of I guess people working with the newest technology in the data space around here, right? So we gather those around all of our hubs in Eastern Europe. We are active in Lithuania, in Poland, and Hungary, Slovakia. We opened up an office in Valencia last year as another technology hub. So I think those dynamics are a bit different. And you have all of these different countries with different laws that still kind of count for you guys as Europe, while at the same time they're actually different countries, even though they're within the European Union. So it's a quite challenging but also very rewarding exercise because you tend to when you build out the team, you tend to grow it and it tends to stay. It's way more stable and the contracts are longer term rather than just a one and done projects type of business, right? It's more like strategic relationships so that enables us still to kind of bringing this breath of fresh air with working the latest data stack, right? Even though I must say the whole view on adapting the modern data stack is quite different, as can testify most of our friends who are from these vendors. They're having a much harder time bringing their modern data stack to grow to Europe,
Oh
like it
yeah.
was growing in other places, especially in Western Europe. I must say there's this divide, north and south, but also west east in terms of adoption or willingness to change the stack that we observe in Europe. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. And I guess to follow up on your earlier comment too about moving from being a strictly services company to either being I don't know if you're going to be a strictly product company at some point or maybe a hybrid of the two, but how much of the dynamics of the companies that you work with motivated you to move towards building a productized service or a product?
So it's actually a great question. Though, what prompted me to kind of move away from basically leading a large division at a bank and just sitting fat and happy, to be honest, there,
Hmm.
and kind of moving into consulting is all the opportunities you could do and say, well, you just have a way bigger impact, to influence, really and I'm speaking from a strictly personal point of view, to influence, I guess, the modernization of enterprise. It's just the impact of their projects have. There's just not within one company, but within many companies. So that's obviously number one. But then moving into this and building out, I guess, just for our listeners to get a view. So we are a 440 person company, and my team grew from like 0 to 27 in 1.5 years, right? So this is where we stand. And now with the product team, we're building it out further. And then the idea with the product was to say, well, we solve similar challenges a different customer. Everyone is either migrating or from legacy technology. I mean, just to give you an example, right? When obviously Oracle is here to stay, but you'd better have very, very good reasons to start a brand new data warehouse or to migrate into a brand new Oracle data warehouse this year than you had 5 years ago when it was almost the default place to go. Now you have many other options to choose from. Just one example. But on the other hand, there's also some of these legacy technologies that really will stay. I always joke and say COBOL will outlive us all, right? Probably is true. So, and out of that, there are certain patterns that emerge that you recognize with what's happening in the marketplace as the enterprises around the region evolve, saying, well, they're faced with the similar challenges. They all want to integrate fintechs. They all want to integrate modern technologies. They all want to integrate SaaS solutions. They want to integrate offerings from the public cloud like AWS or Azure. While at the same time, they really can change. They cannot turn their stack upside down.
Right.
All at once. So, and that kind of, for me, is also a way to think, what can we solve as a product that is fully bootstrapped, and we don't have to do any of that VC stuff and kind of create all these nice slide decks or anything like that, but it's actually pure engineering driven solution to actual business problems that we see. And this is how this thing grows, one at a time. I mean, obviously it's nothing new, right? If you ask any of the big four, any of the other major players in the enterprise IT services space, everyone's got their product here and there they created for a big customer that they try to push to other customers. That's obviously nothing new and also the respectable thing to do. But for me, my focus is to have these things really driven by the engineering rather than driven by sales and marketing or me as a partner
Right.
just pushing it down. Because I think that in order for us to be in the data space and to stay relevant in the future as the technology and automation evolves, we really have to love what we do and be down in the dirt and the details of the engineering stack across the way it evolves, right?
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. And gosh, it reminds me that when I was in Munich, I was talking with some friends, and one of them, worked at a consulting company that serviced, traditional German companies. Right, these companies typically are on-prem, and one of my other friends was from America, and worked at one of the large cloud companies formerly, and so. And the friend who worked at the cloud company, I was like, well, why don't they just move to the cloud? This should be that easy. And it's like, trust me, my other friend who was consulting this on-prem company is like, look, it really isn't that easy. Like, these companies are, they're there for a reason, and they have no desire to move. I think in this case, it was regulatory. Like, they really couldn't do anything, right? And
Oh, that's my
so,
favorite topic, man. That's
oh yeah,
regulatory in the cloud is you're hitting me right in the feels here. The well, I was I think it's fair to say so. It created one of the first cloud data warehouses for a bank. It's an ongoing project, very very successful, interesting implementation of a cloud data warehouse. Obviously fully compliant with the banking regulations and European data protection law. But the challenges that you learn through working with the legal teams and with compliance teams and with the with the entire combination of technical and and organizational and all sorts of measures in order for you to comply, to be able to utilize these services in a compliant way. I'll give an example. I was part of this European Cloud User Coalition. That's a very interesting group of European banks, which is growing, ECUC. That I was with my previous employer, part of the founding team that's on our website, and this group continues to kind of do its very important work to communicate wishes for standards to both regulators and the cloud service providers, saying, you guys, we want to have the same opportunities or similar opportunities as Asian American banks and really large enterprises, like the big tech that are going into the financial space. Let us be able to use cloud technology across Europe in a compliant way, which means a lot of things, meaning that the definition of what a cloud is should be the same across Europe. Right now, this is not the case. A cloud in Poland is different than a cloud in Germany, is different than, I guess, a cloud in, just to give an example of something more like Netherlands, right? So there's different ways that you even define what constitutes a regulatory relevant discussion on can we move to the cloud. So with all that complexity, it's understandable that companies are saying, well, you know what, my Oracle works, my on-premise ETL works, and really everything works. Yeah, I know what I pay, but I can afford it. Why should I be more efficient? And you see this very often, right? So then it's also a lot of incumbent interest for the teams to not really move as quickly as you could. You don't want to break things because it's also a kind of a cultural way of really doing IT projects. The definition of excellence is a different one, I would say. It doesn't mean that it's better. It's just different from what I've seen, for example, with some American companies, or how business is done over there in terms of IT implementations. Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's dive into that for a bit. What does excellent mean typically when you work in Europe versus here in the US?
Right. I guess that will immediately bring us to this discussion: agility, agile. How business and I also building up on your previous episodes with other amazing guests who've been talking about business and IT and kind of how they cooperate and create products together. I think it's pretty clear that you cannot automate. When having few dedicated engineers that understand the business is infinitely more valuable than having an army of standardized, engineers working according to some arcane, very, very boring rules of how they produce, standard quality, standard expectation software by working in iterative Scrum mode, right? This is the very uninspiring, harsh reality of how most enterprises do it. Not everyone. I guess having committed engineers who really understand the business makes the hugest difference, rather than whether you implement agile in this framework or that framework or the other one. They're all as good or as bad and don't really have any merit on their own. And the definition of excellence, I guess the main difference is that the tolerance for errors and for move fast and break things, we're let's back it off a little bit and let's not break anything. Right. So I think that's kind of like, we'll get there and we'll get there in a more efficient manner than if we're just to risk breaking something. This leads, as you obviously see, very few European companies in general in the tech space are, global leaders on I mean, just only a few come to mind that you say the software produced in Europe, and there's like the SAP of the SAP and similar companies, right? They're only based in Europe. However, what you tend to see is a lot of European startups and founder teams that are actually European, where the original idea originated in Europe, and it was an excellent idea. But then they went on to US and Asia to realize it, to bring it to a global brand, to a huge name. So there's a huge divergence between the way the traditional enterprise works, the, I guess, alive but not really healthy startup scene works, driven by complex regulations for just setting up companies. And for giving, for example, something as simple as giving options to employees and making them part of the journey in the different European jurisdictions. Some places it's very easy, other
Yeah.
places like Austria it's really, really hard, and we don't even have the proper legislation for this. I think it's fair to
Interesting.
point this out. So I guess the conservative way of saying we're gonna over-engineer for stability. We're going to focus way more on testing, like you otherwise would. We even see this divide the way software is done in Eastern Europe versus in Western Europe. And the importance of having, for example, test automation, test teams in general differs, right? Because what's the value of, how do you price the additional quality that you'd receive by having another 5-person team that only does QA versus 2 people, right? It's a hard thing to quantify and get a business case on, unless the whole model of how the company operates is everything that we release is smooth, it works, and we know that it probably will probably get a little bit cheaper, but that's how we want it done, right?
Yeah, it's
what do you think
interesting.
about this? How does that sound compared to what you see in your practice or in
It's what I've seen when I talk with people in Europe. So I mean, increasingly I'm talking to business leaders, tech leaders, government officials as well. About tech and data, and I just get this overwhelming sense that people that I talk to, they definitely have this urge to move faster, and be, I guess, more American. I live in America, so that's kind of all I know. And here it's like failure is just sort of part of the game. It's like, yeah, you failed and you move on, and that's how it is. Everything I would say is very tear down here as well, where you don't expect companies to be around that long. If they are around for a long time, it's a weird thing to see. It's cool in some ways. It also is just unusual. Everything is here is a lot more temporal. And then I'm reminded of an article I recently read, and I want to read the book as well. What was in the New Yorker, but it was about a Wirecard, the big German company that I guess was sort of the shining light of innovation and how we should do startups in the EU. Then all of a sudden you realize it's like a complete sham. So I think there's a temptation to want to be like, this fast growing American company. And the thing is, I think in the EU, it's people want to get bought into that dream, so that they want to go along for the ride and really believe.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly that. And you also have this dark side of the startup culture, right? Where, having the ability to break things doesn't mean that if you break things, you almost have to celebrate it. It's almost like, oh, we failed. Right. It's such a huge success that we failed so well, right? No one failed ahead of us in this particular area. That's, there's a certain aspect of that culture which is highly toxic, right? And obviously now with the VC drying up, with the interest rates and the market situation, you see that all of a sudden it's not like every slide deck looks the same and everything. So suddenly this isn't as cool anymore until kind of the sinus waves kind of turns again towards it wasn't Web3, it's LLMs, and it isn't this, it isn't that, it's crypto. Let's find someone to throw funding and if it looks the same, if it talks the same, it is the same, so let's fund it. So
Well, you got to
I
get
don't
the
think.
funding right, and you got to get beaten down by the regulators like Binance and Coinbase did this week. In the U.S. So it's they moved
Yeah, I
fast
mean,
and then got broke.
in EU, we're gonna get this AI Act, and I'm very very eager to see how this will play out.
Mm,
There's some very good aspects to it, like obviously limiting the ability of major corporations, but also major governments to use data for bad things, right? So that limits everyone. But also the question that remains is, um, even though they go into great detail. If you look at how this current suggestions is, they break down into an absurd level of detail the use case, and the question is, can you plan this? Isn't this looking at the past, right? Isn't this limiting our ability to innovate by immediately programming new use cases to be automatically automatically, anything that's worth mentioning being automatically in the gray zone, where you just have huge compliance costs. And at the end of the day, there's just I think a public discussion that needs to be had in Europe, needs to be had in individual countries, and it's bold. I think from I can say from now, from looking at this, is bold opportunity for Europe to kind of lead, using AI in a responsible way, and having the ability to build an ecosystem around corporations that work and play along those rules, but also kind of locking us out of anything made in Europe, and just following along with standard use cases that were already tested somewhere else, and someone paid initial compliance costs elsewhere. So
yeah,
yeah.
that's interesting because it's like the EU is innovative, especially in the area of regulation.
Oh
Uh,
well, there's no doubt about that. But we should also. I mean, it's very easy to look at this in a negative way and say, "Hey, there's just they don't know
Well, the
what they're
U.S.
talking
ain't
about."
gonna do it though. The U.S. I mean, we'll have some hearings on stuff, but trust me, it's like anything that happens in the U.S. is gonna be watered down by all the lobbyists, the big tech companies,
Oh,
and that's just
100%.
how it
And
is, man.
also consider the fact that when someone like the major LLM for-profit corporations are going there and saying we should regulate AI, there's basically saying, yeah, we
Right.
want to lock our spot
Yep.
in front of everyone, and shut the competition out. This is the most classic of a management decision that you can actually have.
Oh yeah.
This is more textbook than
It's like
anything.
101, man.
Yeah.
Regulatory capture. Let's do
Yeah,
this.
exactly. So no, and regulatory capture is on top of problem when they
Yeah.
kind of start moving around from regulate from,
Yeah.
but still from what we're seeing is we want to we I mean, I'm looking at it like integrate. Even to just give an example of, everyone's talking about, oh, this is going to automate our jobs away, it's going to do this and that. Well, no, or not really. Looking at how we could utilize this. Let's say from you're a data services company. How do you utilize large language models to help your customers to do stuff? I mean, obviously, use it as your Google for creating simple code. You don't use Stack Overflow that much, and etc. But what about serious use cases? These models were trained on large amounts of information. You're not going to be able to generate the latest version of the latest framework with it, but you want to migrate out of COBOL, out of SAS. This thing was trained on generations worth of white papers, right?
Yep.
It's very good in doing that. And is it going to automate? From what we're seeing, how it works, is it going to automate your engineers away? No, they're just going to make them productive in a way where projects. It's just like with every other technology. It doesn't replace stuff in terms of great negative net effect. It just enables you to do projects that were previously considered unfeasible. Yeah, am I going to migrate 2 million lines of PL SQL code on manual labor that at the cost of going rates in Western Europe? Good luck with that. Who's going to pay for that? However, can I automate large parts of it if I have to migrate an old data warehouse, if I have to migrate an old operational system or anything like this, and it suddenly gives you an opportunity to do more. So I'm way more optimistic that this will be a kind of a huge net benefit, rather than, and also increasing the productivity of not only the senior engineers and developers, but also helping out also junior newcomers to kind of be more apt with what they do than anything else. And I think just like I remember the who coined this law, but if you see a newspaper article where it ends with a question mark, then you can assume that the answer is no. Is, for example, AI going to automate us all away? The answer is no, right?
Yeah.
And I believe you said so that companies are thinking about AI, but they cannot even do BI, and I can fully
It's
subscribe to that
true.
based on what I'm seeing with customers, with enterprises, it obviously talking about let's get the fundamentals right is way less interesting than having us discussed how AI bots will devise a plan to harm us, right? So
Right. But I feel like in Europe though, like AI is, I think because of just the speed at which business moves and the motivations behind the businesses, right? In the US, for example, there's quarterly earnings calls. There's not a CEO who's not going to mention their AI strategy. Whether it's realistic or not is a different question, but you have to have something happening with AI right now, or you're going to be you're going to suffer a share price decline. Right? That's how it is. Um, Whereas in Europe, I'm very curious, about the adoption of a lot of these tools, whether in word or in spirit, right? 'Cause I think just businesses just have different sets of motivations there. One of them is this weird thing called making money and profits and stuff, which in the U.S. is does happen, but uh, yeah,
you think of it this way. Yeah, we would be more conservative in exploring new technology that we don't when we know don't really know much about.
yeah,
But also on the business side, we'll be way more questioning around: am I going to integrate something that promises me X, Y, and Z, or where the risk just don't match the upside compared to optimizing my process in other
right,
ways, right? So you would you kind of have these companies that are over 100 years old because they consistently chose the less kind of the less risky way. And the same applies to IT, right? Think of the classical case like I migrate a major ERP system, right? This is a make or break for my business. If I'm going to fork a nine figure just to migrate my
yeah,
ERP away, right? So this wouldn't come from virtual money from VCs. This I have to actually earn this through profits, and I would be able to pay for it. So just let's not discount the fact that maybe it's not being the first mover that is going to be the success here in the adoption, but being kind of the second or even the last mover in a particular business area where you already see how it's playing out and which technology will win and which approach will win, and only then you optimize. You skip several levels of failures and don't have to pay for those with minimal downside and minimal compliance risk. But also, I wanted to come back to the point with the regulation of AI.
mm,
Just like you mean, I'm by no means a legal expert, but you do tend to see how legislation kind of is exported.
mm,
We Europeans made the world comply largely with GDPR, much like the Americans made the world comply with tons of other things like their banking requirements or FATCA, etc. So there is this probability where if Europe gets this AI Act together, pardon the pun, then this might spill over with positive effects on the world. But I'm by no means a cheer boy for regulation. I'm just saying that the opportunities are there, and it's up to the regulators to finally kind of decide how deep they want to regulate this, or where they set the guardrails, right? So
yeah. It'll be an interesting discussion too, and in fact, two of the people helping draft that legislation will be on the podcast very, very soon. So,
awesome.
curious about their thoughts. Yeah, yeah, because I feel like they've done a really good job at balancing, regulation, but also trying to incentivize innovation. Because I think that they also realize that the EU does have to have some semblance of innovation and not just be, the world's nanny about everything, right? And setting rules. I mean, hell, America does a good enough job at that anyway. I'm joking, um, but it definitely sees there's two sides to the issue where, at least the people that I know who are working on this, they aren't blind to the fact that um, the EU does need to step up in the areas of innovation. This is an area where I think anyone you talk to, and the business climate there is just,
Also,
it does move slower.
I also consider the fact that we do have, I mean, in Western Europe clearly, but also in Eastern Europe, there's a large, from Estonia to Bulgaria, and even Greece, we see with Microsoft investments there. So across kind of the whole Eastern European line, we have a very thriving IT services sector that moved from outsourcing into being actually the backbone of major American and global companies.
Oh yeah, you're hugely bullish on Eastern Europe.
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm very, very bullish on Eastern Europe and Central Europe. I love Western Europe, but you have to see that in terms of growth and dynamics, the structure is severely different. And you can even see it if you talk to kind of even it's something as simple as bank ITs. Banks in the eastern part of Europe, they are the ones that are that are actually the most technology wise, the most innovative. And the further west you go, they tend to be bigger, with more budgets and with more everything. And this is where you get bogged down in actually just running legacy stuff and planning for a future of modern tech that almost never comes, right? So but because when you talk Europe, we have to think of Europe as both and not really have this artificial divide overall. And if you see like major corporations that have their actually meanwhile most of their engineering in Europe rather than in the US, I think of a few examples of that, and you have to stay bullish that overall, despite with certain outliers, you will get this immediately labeling Europe as being non-innovative or lagging behind by default should not nearly be the default case, right? So
that's true. There's definitely different shades of Europe, right? So it's
I have Bulgarian roots, by the way. So I have overview on that part of the world, and also we work with like I said, I have a few of my colleagues from my teams in Lithuania, in Poland, in Hungary, in Slovakia. So I do see kind of the dynamics of the market there, the kind of people that we get, and the growth and the energy that we have there. So that can only make you bullish that this tech story is not really over, right? We're not going to stay in a museum or sell schnitzel and nice vacations in the Alps. We
nice
which we certainly continue to do. I assume.
Yeah. That's funny. I got to say, the engineers I meet in Eastern Europe are fantastic. I don't know what's in the water there, but it just seems like the level of STEM training there is.
This came from.
It's different.
This came out of the Cold War, dude. It's still alive in the way that back in the day you have all of this STEM training in mathematics, and it was all about military and rocket production. Let's be honest. All these institutes and develop and after obviously after the for what is like 30 years already, you still this kind of tradition in the school stayed despite, I guess, extremely substandard levels of funding. There you can make a very good point that you don't really need to invest more in education because if you compare the output per euro in Eastern Europe versus Western Europe, then you're vastly overpaying in Western Europe for what seems to be very few, if any benefit. But in Eastern Europe, this tradition stayed, and that's kind of across the whole line. You see what's happening in Estonia. I'm not particularly active in Estonia, but I do have some observations there. Amazing place, hugely vibrant technology sector, but moving also down to Lithuania, Poland, Latvia. So many things happening. You see companies moving to Romania, Bulgaria. You see the homegrown companies in Poland and Czech. So quite a strong IT sector, very resilient in terms of I guess relying on the public sector for for education. So there's almost a tradition where you have these strong private academies. You have just a strong ethic of people just you're rolling up their sleeves and learning the new technologies. It's not about I came from this prestigious school and that's why I did computer science there and that's why I'm the best. You don't have that in Eastern Europe, and I know there's quite a few people that say, well, but overall, speaking from if you look at Europe in general, if you look at your particular country or town, yeah, they're obviously more prestigious places than other places, but precisely because of this decentralization and not relying just like, oh, I have the Ivy League or whatever, and if I don't come out of that, I'm not great. You have this huge, resilient, non-fragile sector that just continues to improve, and kind of Eastern Europe started as a story where you do cheap outsourcing. That was
Right.
You had to kind of like move away from that. You're the back office of Europe role, and now it's very similar to when you're like a major like American company. You'd have people from many states, not because you really are interested in operating in those states that much, but really that's where you find the talent, and your offices are where you find the talent. And also kind of the salary differences are being slowly converging to something in terms of net pay that is quite similar. So you don't even have that kind of cost advantage. Obviously, have like higher taxes here, lower taxes there, and or stronger labor markets and weaker labor markets. But one of the interesting things that I think supercharged this sector is right after as we roll out of the pandemic, and suddenly the remoteness being the default. And all of your Eastern European locations shoot through the roof, because suddenly them sitting on Zoom calls and Teams meetings isn't as exotic. Some people that never otherwise would hear about, but this is your team with whom you do great things wherever in Europe you tend to have like a customer project or location. This is that's why I'm super optimistic that this will continue to kind of. Yeah. We're still seeing kind of. I think we're at the beginning of this now, actually, because it's quite clear that this hybrid thing is to stay, and that this just opened up all of these talent pools across Eastern Europe to be part of your workforce, whichever strong traditional company you might be in France, Germany, Austria, or whatever. Yeah.
Do you think Western Europe is going to try and borrow some things from Eastern Europe?
That's actually a quite interesting projection. I think the competition market is going to force us/them to do so, because you would just. Because you would just be unable to compete even within the own European Union space if you don't innovate. And it's quite clear that in terms of capital, Western Europe is much better positioned, right? I mean, there's established companies with global companies in all sorts of economic sectors. But in terms of IT, I think the importance of Eastern Europe, of your hubs in Eastern Europe, of your people in Eastern Europe and Central Europe are going to increase. And maybe how it's going to play out is kind of like a settle around an equilibrium where this is kind of the competitive advantage that you have, and that the advantage is there not purely because of costs, but because there's only so many engineers that you could have to do all of your software development and critical software development. Where I'm not talking about maintenance of standard stuff or just augmented agile teams that you don't really they're not key to your business, right? So yeah, but overall, I think both sides are going to profit from this. I don't see Western Europe kind of losing in a way where it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah, it seems like you would expect that the whatever's working in Eastern Europe is going to trickle into Western Europe, but I guess we'll find out.
No, right? I think the culture. It seems like it's not like a culture in businesses plays a huge role. Culture in societies also plays a different role. You cannot argue. I mean, you've been to probably like 35 states in the U.S. Have to count them up, but you see how different there's places right across state lines.
Yeah.
And same thing in Europe, right? And you probably will agree to be different, and this diversity is actually quite a great thing, quite a strong thing to have the different perspectives of the different teams from different countries with their
Yeah.
local culture, flavor, and whatnot. I don't think that it has to be copied and pasted like oh, it worked there, let's make it work here, just because the situations are so different, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you have major European regulated businesses; they're not going to get eaten away by some fintech in Lithuania tomorrow, right? It's just not going to happen. So, yeah. But coming back to the data space, I certainly think that we can keep up by just having the best of both, right?
Yep.
By adopting the stability and the serious practices of developing software the way we do it in the West. West part of Europe, with the innovative spirit and the skills and just the sheer amount of talent available in Eastern Europe that actually wants to stay in Eastern Europe. But those are not people that are somehow willing to migrate, to move.
Right.
And we recognize that, and we just open up local offices and we integrate them as part of our team and as part of our customers' team. That seems to be a good thing for us, and I believe for many other companies.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Do you have any ambitions of making your way to the States as a company? Probably a competitive
Um,
secret, but I'm just very curious. So
yeah, at some point, why not? Let's
yeah.
see. I'll actually be eager to. I told you I'll share a few information slash details around our product, around our data integration
Mm,
product, and be interested to hear your opinion on this. But without being too optimistic or being too I guess arrogant about this, but I think we can make it into one of these niche global brands that actually are quite interesting
mm.
to a lot of companies, including American companies. That gives me the optimism that we could do it. But I'm in no means in a rush to do this in the kind of VC kind of way. To let's pump it up with some VC capital and add 50 more
I
engineers
don't
to
think
it
you
and
need
just
to
water it
right
down.
now. I don't think you need to. Any from a competitive standpoint, it's like I think a lot of competitors that you might have had during the boom times. I mean, I think most of them are going to be out of business or acquired very soon, at least within the next 12 to 24 months. That's just how it is. And if you have something that's valuable, you have something that's valuable. People want to buy it. As one of my really wealthy friends once told me, if you want to make a lot of money, sell something that people want to buy. It's
At
pretty.
a lower price.
It's
that's,
pretty
that's
simple, right?
it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think they really? What do you think? What do you reckon? What is your projection based on what you see right now? And we see this across the board. Companies pitching this and that AI implementation, and let's automate the generation of SQL, and let's automate the generation of this and that and the other. Would you see? Are really most of them hot air that is not going to materialize?
I think
I
so. I
mean,
think a lot of it's hot air that's not going to materialize. I think the underlying motivation of continuous automation, in the sense we're going to continually automate tasks, that's a secular trend that's not going away. But if I kick the tires of certain products, or if I look at the pitches of certain products, I don't. So when I kick the tires, I think there's something there, and most of it is probably doesn't need to be there. It's a lot of hot air. When I look at the marketing pitches, I just don't get the sense that IT teams really want this for a variety of reasons, right? And so automation is definitely, it needs to be pitched in a way where it's going to be a net positive, and it appeals to, um, it sounds obvious enough, right? But a real pain point that an IT team has, but not in a way that's going to jeopardize their jobs, right?
right.
So when
Absolutely.
I see stuff like, oh yeah, we're gonna just automate, you don't need to write SQL anymore, and it's like, yeah, but that's that person's job there that you're just trying to pitch to. Like, it ain't gonna work because they want to
Wasn't
write
what
SQL.
that what BI supposed to do 15 years ago? We just visually drag and drop tables. Boom, you don't have SQL.
Right. Yeah,
That didn't turn out so great.
and SQL is supposed to automate a lot of stuff too.
Yeah.
When I talked to old DBAs back in the day, it's so that's one aspect of it. And every single company in the universe now is trying to jump on the large language model bandwagon, and so whether or not it makes any sense, it's like now we're an AI company, right? So I've seen a few of these cycles before, having worked in ML, and seen various pitches over the years. I mean, the secular trends do happen over time. Machine learning is adopted more largely in the enterprise, for example, but it's not like this is an overnight thing where you're going to see a mass culling of the old with the new.
Right.
I
What
just
do you
don't.
think about the small language models? I like local
I think I
versions,
think
something like
actually I think that's a smarter way of going about it. And in fact, one person I'm talking to later today, is working on exactly that for sort of a next gen BI tool. I think small language models are cool, especially these quote foundational models that can, I think, more be tied to the data of your business, which is inherently usually very small, right?
Right.
Right. So, but again, we're sort of in I would say new territory mixed with old territory, and I don't know. We'll just see where it goes. I think the big difference now, though, is the past few cycles of machine learning have all occurred when money was really cheap and you could just throw money at these companies and see how it goes. That's not the case anymore. And so I think the underlying economics of these companies is just going to be driven by different motivations than they were in the
Right.
past, because it's the first time you've had expensive money for a long time in a startup environment. And all these
What
startups that made money, I mean, not or raised money. I wouldn't say made money, but they raised money. Now they have to pivot to something new without the backing of like, oh, I'm going to get another round soon, right? That ain't happening. So
I was listening to your podcast recently, and one of your guests, let me recall the name. I think it's Brian Green,
yeah,
mentioned that it's not only necessarily the company with the best technology that kind of wins in the marketplace, right?
hmm
And I was thinking about this. That's actually a quite insightful thing to say, because if you move with the right marketing, right marketing budget at the right time, you can secure part of the market, and the good technology just gets, it's probably better, but not so materially better as to matter. And you still kind of have like a subpar technology that ends up reigning the marketplace for years. We have also seen this in the, even if you think back, like Turbo Pascal versus C won, but it wasn't that obvious, right? I
right,
mean, I would have been with in the Turbo Pascal, branch of things, but probably the difference isn't that big anyway. To say, well, oh, so substandard, it is not. But I guess something similar will probably play out in the way that you do standardized. I don't know. Small language model trained on your, or working with your own company enterprise data that you just don't want to give out. There's no way you kind of even push it out
yeah.
to a SaaS somewhere, and you just want to utilize that information with the abilities of something like a language model, right? So
Well, and I think a lot of it, the success of language models, whether they're small or big, really depends on the quality of the data that's being trained on and the type of responses that it provides back. So, I mean, I use ChatGPT every day more to sort of push the limits of where I can understand how it's useful to me. And I think I figured it out for my use case, right? It's good for coming up with, I think, good. So if I'm writing a script, it's good for coming up with a work, sort of a story arc of a script. But the points within the script, for example, it still needs to be filled in by me. Like it almost costs me more time to go back and re-edit what it says and just like give me an outline. I'll fill in everything and go from there. But I can see this in a business, right? So if I had a small language chat interface on my data, and I started asking it questions, like it better well be right. I mean, that's sort of table stakes. But the problem is, how would you know? So
right.
that's what I mean by BI is hard enough. Like it's hard enough to know if the data is correct when you're looking at a chart, for example, right? Now you
Yeah.
put this behind a chat interface
You run
that
to the CEO and give him information based on a question asked in it, where you deliver the output right away, where you're unsure whether the underlying data really gives him the exact answer to the question that he or she required from you, and that suddenly you'd want to double check that, right? But for things like automating,
yeah.
I don't know, creating presentations out of a text, or just like, I also use it regularly. ChatGPT, my experience is I almost have like a good feeling about which things it can do and which things it cannot do. It's hard to describe, but it's almost
hmm
like a person where okay, this is what they can do, what they cannot do. So
Yeah.
for certain things, you think they're highly reliable, and other things like, yeah, I mean, I can ask it, but probably not worth even wasting the time to ask this question, right?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I always joke it's kind of like a it's a very convincing intern.
It's very convincing. No, but also
So
the way that you think that will change is like providing context. And when we
yeah.
talked about prompt engineering, I think there's some huge potential there,
It
because
is.
you would, because that's where being good at querying it and knowing how to do it, it's almost like makes the difference between drag and dropping in a BI tool or writing SQL, right? And then if I want to do a query that gives me really good information, I will, and if including my current job, I will write my SQL, right? I will not
Hmm.
just drag and drop stuff. And it's the same thing with when you get serious about utilizing it in an enterprise for like actually basing decisions off of what such a small language model will tell you about your own data.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, just in terms of where we see this data engineering business going, I think all of this newest automation will not put us out of business. In fact, it will enable us to untangle all systems, quicker, easier. And if someone is thinking, well, they're a data engineer and they better learn some, assembly programming skills or
Yeah.
like deeper, stuff because, the rest of it is being automated away, is changing. But I don't think it's changing in a way where you need less expertise or where you would, be out of the job.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's definitely true. I think if anything, it's a forcing function. Well, just like the abstraction of tools, right? I mean, back in the
hmm,
day, you'd have to, spin up Hadoop and manage that, all that. Now that's managed. You'd be kind of silly to spin up your own Hadoop cluster unless you had a really good reason to do that nowadays, right? I think it's just, again, the secular trend is simplification and abstraction, right?
right,
So
right, right.
large language models and all this, it's just simply in automation. All it does is abstracts current workflows and practices, which means you get to move up higher in the value chain, which makes you potentially more valuable because you're solving harder problems. But
It's
that's the nature of
you're
technology from
absolutely
day
right.
one.
But I still see, in terms of Hadoop, I mean, it's like you better have very good reason. There's people still running use cases on Hadoop.
Sure.
And the interesting thing is that when you talk to these guys, amazing engineers, know their stuff, know their Spark code inside out. But when you ask them the question, what's the reason for this to exist in 2023 compared to the options that you otherwise would have? And suddenly the discussion is around, oh, but this is such a custom Spark code. You can't really, I mean, this and that. Yeah, but does it really
Yeah.
solve a problem that requires such a complex situation? And then it always kind of almost pains me to see what would be an extremely good engineer, computer science person, trained person that would defend such a solution just out of the reflex of having job security. Let's be honest. And you see this in especially large enterprises. There's these teams that are running these technologies. They don't want to let loose, right? So it's good to point to them out that even though if they were to move to a simpler technology, they actually still move up the value chain
Yep.
because they'll be providing more value with a simpler approach without changing the underlying premises of the solution/problem statement. So there's I think quite a few convincing and also kind of learning in the data community to just because we found a cool technology that we mastered within a year doesn't mean that we should stick with it forever, right?
Right.
And yeah.
Well, awesome, man. It's been great chatting with you as always. I always appreciate our conversations. Like so for the audience, Evo and I are the kind of guys we'll chat all day, and that we literally do. So, but
Thanks so much
for
for
your
inviting
sake,
me.
we won't. Yeah, yeah. Thanks. For people who want to learn more about you, how can they get a hold of you or find out more?
They could add me on LinkedIn on Karl Ivo Sokolov, and I'll be announcing our new product very soon.
Nice.
So that'll be a separate announcement. Thanks so much for inviting me, and I
Anytime,
guess
man.
we'll see each other in the US in a couple of weeks.
Hope so. Yeah. Okay. All
All
right.
right.
See you, buddy. Take care.
See you. Bye bye.